Welcome to Stand in Your Truth, episode 4. This episode, we're going to be talking about listening to your heart's intelligence. And I am here with Alan Strydom. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Kerry. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. My name is Alan Strydom. I am from South Africa, and I head up HeartMath in South Africa, meaning I'm the managing director of HeartMath. I am now living in Chiang Mai in Thailand, been here about 3 years, but everything is online, so I'm still very much involved with coaching and mentoring and training via HeartMath.
Yeah, and that's how we met. I'm trying to think when it was. So it was like January.
Yeah.
January this year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It feels like so long ago, but it was January.
I know.
So I came to the workshop. It was first watching the movie The Power of the Heart, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you did a subsequent workshop. I think it was on the heart's intuition. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I've been involved with HeartMath for a number of years. I've known about you for a number of years. So I set up Whole Science back in 2008, and I remember interviewing Howard Martin back then, which was a long time ago. And I was going to do my postgraduate thesis on HeartMath. But I decided that I wanted to, use this information and kind of put it out there in terms of marketing and communications and editorial type stuff. So that's kind of where I went with that. But yeah, we met up for a coffee, and I'm just really fascinated by everything HeartMath does and its potentials, and how transformative it is really. So I wondered if you could just share a little bit about your journey of how you kind of came to HeartMath and how you started following your own heart, I guess. That'd be
sure. How much time do we have?
We have an hour, so
okay.
Feel free to go as long as you.
Sure. Okay, so how did I come to HeartMath? Well, I guess for me, the first 38 years of my life was very much a head-centered life that I lived. I didn't know about the heart at all. And I think it was around about 38, 39 years old. And I came out of a 11-year relationship with somebody. And I fell into a 2-year depression because of that story. And I struggled with trying to come to terms with the ending of the relationship. And I had all of these tools available to me. So I've got a background in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, psychoneuroimmunology, PNI, hypnotherapy, and I also have a bunch of friends in this field as well. So I had all the resources available to me, and yet everything I tried to resolve how I felt didn't change a thing, because you can't really change the way you feel at the level of thinking. You have to change it at the level of feeling. So this resulted in a 2-year depression, and I know it was 2 years because what happened was that I was living in Cape Town at the time, a place called Surfers Corner, on the 10th story floor of a 14-story building. And it was the beginning of this, I think it was the beginning of February, around about there. It was a Monday. My ex let me know that she was back in town, and that she had her new Italian boyfriend with her. And then I also found out that she was staying around the corner from where I was. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I actually became too afraid to even leave the building. And this whole spiral began. And by the Wednesday, I was feeling quite low on energy and feeling quite sorry for myself. And I remember getting an email from a guy called Andy Pellant, who at the time I didn't know him, but I was on HeartMath's database because I had bought some of their biofeedback technology years ago, and we'll probably get into the technology part later as well. But I was on their database, and Andy had just arrived in Cape Town, and he had the database with him, and he was like, does anybody want to chat about HeartMath? And I replied kind of half-heartedly, no pun intended, on the Wednesday, going, yeah, okay, I'll chat to you. By the Friday, my mood had worsened so much that I was on the edge. I was contemplating taking my life. So I was on the way to the window and to jump, and I got a phone call, And I just reached over for the phone automatically and picked it up. And it was Andy, and he was like, I just read your email. Would you like to meet up and chat about HeartMath? And some part of me just said, yeah, sure, why not? And we agreed to meet. And for some reason, I decided to put that off, that inevitable thing that I was going to do. And we met up, and I remember meeting up with him, and he's saying to me, well, are you using the technology? Are you using the techniques? Are you practicing HeartMath? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And the reason being, because I originally bought the PC software for the technology. I converted to Mac, and for me to carry on with using the software, I had to now repurchase the Mac software. This was back in the Stone Ages, if you will. And I said to him, you guys want more money for the software, and I'm not going to buy it. And he said, like, dude, you obviously need it. And there was something else that he also mentioned to me. He said to me, I feel like you're on the edge of something. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. If only you knew where I was when you called me. And he said, if you had leaned into the edge, I wonder what would happen. And I became quite curious. And then he said, if you come to one of my talks, I will gladly give you the software, and then you can reconnect again. You can start practicing the techniques, and let's see how it goes from there. So I thought, ooh, okay, something free, something is finally going my way. And I was in a very weird space at that time, right? So it's like, oh yeah, let's do that. And I went to his talk the next day, and I showed up early in the morning for his first talk. And Andy, being the charismatic man that he was, I was hooked. He was speaking about all this beautiful heart-centered stuff. And I was like, where's this been all my life? And then later on in the day, which I stayed for all of these presentations, he had about 4 in a row, right? And he had people coming in the whole time. And later on in the day, I met a doctor who was working with cancer and HIV patients using HeartMath. And so the doctor was saying the medical science point of view, and Andy was giving his spiritual side. And between the two of them, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing stuff, right? And I went to the doctor afterwards, and I said to him, I want to come see you for 2 reasons. Number one is I want to see, how do you use this thing called HeartMath in your practice? I have no idea. And number two, I think I've got a problem. So I kind of owned up to that. And I went to see him for about 3 sessions where we used the technology. So it's biofeedback, a little sensor in your ear. You can see the heart rhythm patterns on the screen. And because you can see it on the screen, you can learn to change it. And that's what I did in those 3 sessions with this doctor. And I then installed the Mac software. I committed some time to it. I was practicing these techniques for 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, every single day. I was like, I'm gonna do this. 2 weeks later, I find myself 500 kilometers away from Cape Town in a small little coastal village, and I bump into my ex by accident. Accident, right? Synchronicity. Not only do I bump into her, but with her boyfriend.
Right.
And that was the time that I knew that something had changed in me, because I literally had seconds in which to change the way I felt inside as I bumped into them, right? That kind of shock. But I was able to manage myself, and we went for coffee, and it was all fine. And when I waved them goodbye as they rode up into the distance, like one of those Western movies, I was like, ooh, I feel different. The emptiness, the pain, whatever it was that I felt inside was changed, and I was okay with it. And it was only a couple of months later that I realized that the depression I had wasn't because of the relationship that had ended, but it was because I was unable to give myself what I needed when the relationship ended. And that was a real journey to the heart for me, which literally took 2 weeks to get over that. But it hasn't stopped there. So since then, I've been committing the rest of my life really to teaching others how to do this. Yeah. Wow. So that's long story.
That's a powerful story, but it only took 2 weeks to turn it around.
For me, it took 2 weeks, right? But I must say, I mean, if other people try this, it's going to differ. It depends on the way they are at. Yeah, it took 2 weeks for me to turn around. I still have that issue though. So a couple of years after becoming really involved with HeartMath and bringing HeartMath to South Africa, I was able to get in touch with a couple of other biofeedback practitioners. So I've been very fortunate in that way. And I remember going for brain testing, so they put a little skull cap on you and they check your brainwave patterns and they look at all those kind of things. And believe it or not, for someone like me, there is a marker for depression. There is actually a part of the brain that lights up. And they were able to say, oh, there is a tendency that you could have depression. So what has been happening since then is that I've learned to manage it. I'm able to see where I am on a daily basis. I'm able to spot where I'm starting to slip down the slope, pull myself out, how to do that. And that's what HeartMath provides, is the how-to part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so tell us a bit more for those who don't know anything about HeartMath. Who are
Ooh,
they
okay.
and what do they offer?
Okay, sure. So HeartMath is a company in the United States, California, in Boulder Creek, actually. Um, they've been around since 1990s, and the company is really bridging the science and spirituality. For me, that's what it is. It's the bridge between science and spirituality. So for the first 10, 15 years of HeartMath's existence, it was an exploration into the heart, the metaphorical heart, the physical heart, looking at things like HRV, which is heart rate variability, um, using techniques to tap into that intuitive intelligence of the heart. Right? And a key point that we speak about in HeartMath is that of self-regulation. So can we manage ourselves, our emotional selves, and how do we do that? So that was for the first 10, 15 years. And then the technology came along, like science finally caught up to prove what we're doing works. And so now we have the biofeedback technology. For those interested, you can look up Inner Balance for the phone or M-Wave Pro for the computer. It's a little sensor. I actually have one here with me. Little sensor. There we go.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah, that clips onto your ear. And it picks up your heart rate variability. So as your heart beats, it creates a pulse wave that moves through your body. And the time between each beat gives us information. So when you are stressed out, you'll see a particular pattern of the heart and what we call incoherence. So it's jaggedy and chaotic. And then when you are more in alignment, what we call coherence, it's a different pattern. It's more of a smooth waveform. And because you can see it on the screen, you can learn to change it. And so this is the self-regulation part. So that's basically what HeartMath is about, is that learning how to self-regulate, which leads to more coherence and ultimately leads to more resilience. And that's something we all need right now, yeah?
Yeah,
Especially
absolutely. Oh
in
my
these
God.
COVID times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do
Yeah.
you feel then that your journey and your experience sort of HeartMath taught you how to self-regulate from that painful or difficult experience you went from kind of, the pain being sort of all consuming to you sort of having a bit more control over that and your emotional state?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So for me, it's a daily practice, So what I do now since 2012, back in 2012, I did my formal training with HeartMath in the States. Came back to London with my colleague, and then back to South Africa, and we started training coaches, and that's kind of what we do now. Is run workshops like we attended, and train and mentor coaches. And part of that which I like to focus on with coaches, our HeartMath coaches, is that it's a daily practice that we engage with. So it's kind of like sitting down for meditation in the morning or doing your yoga practice. So you want to commit time to building what we call a resilient muscle, right? And the biofeedback lets you know exactly that you're there, you're getting it 100% or close to 100% because you can't lie, right? You can't cheat yourself out of this one.
No. Mm.
So then you do your 5, 10, 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. The longer it is, the deeper the experience. Sure, I'll give it that much. But once we take that sense off our ear, self-regulation doesn't stop there. It then goes in throughout the day. It's not like I take the sensor off, I go, okay, I'm done self-regulating for the day. I'm now just going to go and haphazard do stuff. I want to continue self-regulating in whatever I'm doing. So whether that's driving in traffic or having a conversation with somebody or studying, whatever it is, coherence, that optimal state that we're speaking about, it's bringing our best self to whatever it is that we're doing with intention, with awareness, with that self-regulation capacity.
Yeah. I mean, I think I first saw it demonstrated on someone at a conference. It was a limit target intention experiment.
Right. Yeah.
And they had the freeze framer back then.
Yes.
But what I find really powerful about biofeedback is the fact that you've got a breathing pacer and you can see it in real time. So it sort of helps you to, almost regulate your breathing, slow down. When you change your breathing, you change everything, right? And it's sort of, it really is transformative.
I'm so glad you said that, because this is something that people often see when we do a demonstration. Like if I give a talk, I'll do a demonstration using the biofeedback. And I'll use somebody from the audience as a volunteer, and they'll get it, they'll get that coherent state, they'll get these beautiful heart wave patterns. And then somebody always in the audience says, so it's just about the breathing, right? It's like, no, hold on. If we really unpack what we're doing, the first thing is, where do you place your attention? So even with the biofeedback, you've got the breathing pacer, and you're focusing on the breathing pacer. So what you're doing is you're teaching yourself, you're training yourself to focus and keep your attention on something. So it's almost like an exercise in mindfulness, if you will. Now, if you don't have the sensor with you or the biofeedback, we use the heart as that anchor. So wherever you go, your heart is there. That's what you're going to tap into. That's what you're going to focus on. And by focusing on the heart, what we're doing is we're interrupting the old stress pattern or program that we run unconsciously. Right? So if I'm trying to get to a meeting and I'm in the traffic, I'm going, oh my God, I'm late. And I take a moment just to focus my attention on the area around the heart. What I'm doing is I'm interrupting that old programming pattern of going, I'm late, and then the frustration or anxiety that comes with that. That's the first step. The second step, after we've shifted or redirected our attention, the second step then is to regulate the breathing. So this is where the breathing is important, because breathing in a particular way brings balance to the autonomic nervous system. So what we want to do in terms of coherence is we want to make sure that our inhalation matches our exhalation. So you can inhale to the count of 5, exhale to the count of 5. Don't hold the breath at any point. Just simply allow the inhalation to become the exhalation, to become the inhalation again. So there's this lovely in and out flow of breath, but it's mindful again, and it's rhythmical. That's what we want to pay attention to, the rhythm. And then once we've got that, so we've changed our focus, we've changed the autonomic nervous system, and we're no longer in that fight or flight or frozen. We're in a dynamic state where we can decide how we want to respond. If we then become aware of how we feel, which normally is a lot calmer and quieter, and we shift our attention over to that feeling, we can amplify that feeling, we can bring in appreciation, we can bring in compassion, care, love, appreciate, anything really. But it's the feeling then that kind of supports that focused state and autonomic nervous system being in balance. Because then we're releasing beneficial hormones into the system, DHEA, for example, right? And that becomes the carrier then of the experience. Whereas the opposite of that would be, if we were in a stressed state, it would be cortisol. So when we're stressed out, we produce cortisol, and cortisol becomes the carrier of experience, right? So then everything starts to go wrong. But if we can just shift our attention, bring it to the heart, be mindful of the breath, and then get into that feeling, that's the important part.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine there's so many people at the moment having those spikes of cortisol and, really sort of desperate for something that can sort of soothe them. And I think biofeedback's a really great sort of visceral tool to see. I mean, you've got mobile devices as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
take them out on the street.
Yeah, sure. So the mobile device is called Inner Balance. So I'm just going to open up there for you. I can do that. That's a breathing pacer, by the way, and that disconnects to the phone to the sensor on the ear, and you spend a couple of minutes practicing. The key point here as well is that we don't have to commit a lot of time to the practice. As I said before, the deeper or the longer you practice, the deeper your experience goes, yes. But I remember back in 2014, I was consulting for a big company in South Africa, a health company, and they were talking about going into sub-Saharan Africa. They were branching out. And the CEO was talking to his managers and he says, "Oh, guys, it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of emails and you're going to be working late into the night. And here's Alan." So he gave this big fear thing. And then here's Alan. I'm going, "Oh my God, what do we do?" So I've got somebody up and put the sensor on their ear and I got them to breathe in that way and to feel that feeling, but only for a minute, right? And we could see the changes on the screen. And I asked the person, "So how do you feel?" And no, I feel more centered, more present, quieter, calmer. So great. You did this in 1 minute with your eyes open in front of all of these people without knowing what to expect. So don't tell me you don't have 1 minute once a day to do this, or 1 minute 10 times a day. Because every time we shift our attention to the heart and we engage with that breath, we engage with the feeling, we're reinforcing the neural network, the capacity, the muscle memory to do it over and over and over again. Quicker, longer. It's a muscle.
So we sort of recalibrating ourselves to be more in tune with ourselves, would you say? Is it like a daily practice that the more we do it, the more we get better at it, I guess, and regulating ourselves?
Yeah. So that's a great comment to make there, an observation. Because that first step of shifting your attention to the heart, it not only interrupts the current triggers that you have, but it also builds that neural capacity, the rewiring to the metaphorical heart. So we never say, for example, "I love you" from the bottom of my neocortex. Kerry, let's have an elbow-to-elbow conversation. We speak about love from the bottom of our heart. Let's have a heart-to-heart conversation, right? So we know intrinsically that there's something important about the heart. And every time we shift our attention to the heart, we are reinforcing that connection. So over time, what happens is that we start to live more organically from the heart. We make better decisions, make better choices, because we are also more coherent. So we're more in balance and alignment and attuned to ourselves and to everything around us. Instead of reactive, we are more responsive.
Yeah. So we're making choices from a more sort of centered place, would you say?
Yeah,
Calm,
absolutely.
more balanced. Yeah, I love HeartMath. Everything HeartMath does, I find it so fascinating and so exciting, right? Such an exciting time in human history and consciousness, and particularly with everything that's going on right now. Like, people really, really need this stuff. They need something that they can, they can solidly see and touch, and kind of gives them that feedback and that sort of reassurance. Okay, I'm doing it right, and I feel better as well. It's that interaction, it's that two-way feedback, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's transformative in nature, and that's what I really love about it. This idea of the science part is what people really like now as well, because it does give you that tangible experience, right? It gives you the proof, as it were, that what you're doing is working. And we do need it now more than ever. But it still comes down to the daily practice, what it is that you do moment to moment, feeding, what we call feeding the field, or how we self-regulate. I remember years ago, back in the 90s, I did a self-development course for Tony Robbins. And now everybody should know Tony, right? And he was talking about achieving goals. And he said that when you set out to achieve your goal, it's like a pilot taking off on the runway in an airplane. And as he takes off and he's aiming for that other city over there, it's never in a straight line. The plane is always blown off course because of wind conditions or whatever, right? And the pilot has to keep making those adjustments until he finally lands right on the right runway, in the right city, etc. Those adjustments is the self-regulation part, right? So whatever it is that we want, and there's nothing wrong with wanting or needing or desiring, that's where growth comes from. But whatever it is that we want or we want to experience, it's about how do we self-adjust in order to get there. The problem is for many people is that they've learned to live in the world in a particular way, not through their fault, it's just the ways we've learned to cope. Yeah, we didn't know any better at the time. And these coping mechanisms become habits, and largely unconscious habits that are trying to do the best job that they can, but they only go to a certain point and then they kind of fall apart. And that's where the stress comes from. So if we learn to interrupt those old programs and patterns, build new habits, that's when the change happens. That's when the transformation occurs.
So yeah, so tell us a bit more about the science of the heart, because the heart is very intelligent, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So, there's so much to say about the science of the heart. Anything in particular that you wanted to know?
No, just yeah, I guess just the most interesting points or anything you want to share with people.
Right. So, I guess for me, the interesting points, if we look at the physical heart, for example, we know it's more than just a pump. It has over 40,000 ganglia, which is pretty similar to the neurons that you might find in the brain. So there's a capacity for learning, for thinking, for memory, as it were. Not quite the same way as your brain thinks, but there is something there. If we look back in the 1990s, there was a hormone that was discovered back in the 1990s called atrial peptide. And atrial peptide regulates the release of cortisol in the body. So for me, that's quite an interesting thing, because it's almost as if the heart knows that, okay, we're going to get stressed out, so here's a little something to keep the edge off. But what do? We play the drama over and over and over in our heads, right? But already there's this atrial peptide, this hormone, there to help regulate cortisol, stress. Another hormone that it produces is oxytocin, that bonding chemical, right? And that's what we need more of nowadays in terms of community, of bonding with each other, of how relationships interact. What else can I say about the heart? Oh, okay, here's another one. The heart speaks to the brain more than the brain speaks to the heart. So at least 90% of the information is traveling from the body to the brain, and about 10% back down again. And that's through the vagus nervous system. So there's a lot of research on the vagus nervous system. But what's important about that for me is how we can tap into the intelligence of the heart. So if the heart is, here's another way to say it. If the heart is beating moment to moment, it's not beating in the past where your sadness and sorrows lie. It's not beating in the future where your fear and anxieties lie. It's in the present moment. So this moment to moment beating, everything's actually okay. When you connect with that, everything's actually quite perfect. And if we can learn to quieten the brain down, we can access that intuitive intelligence. That intuitive intelligence comes more in the form of a feeling than intellectual insight, for example. So it's more of a visceral embodiment where, because the body is more present, the brain is somewhere else, right? We can access all the information that's in the quantum field right here, right now.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about how you tapped into that then, because I guess, like, in the past, before you sort of discovered HeartMath, you were, like you say, you were kind of stuck in your head about the situations and things, and now you've really trained in biofeedback and become more present in your body. Like, how does that show up for you in terms of listening to your intelligence?
So there is a technique in HeartMath called heart-focused breathing. It's the first technique that anybody will learn. It's the most simplest, but for me, it's by far the most powerful. And heart-focused breathing is simply two things. The first step is to shift your attention to the heart. And you can place your hand on your heart if you like. And the second step then is to regulate your breathing, as we've spoken about before. Bringing your inhalation to match your exhalation while your attention is on the heart. So you simply just drop your attention to your chest, breathe into the count of 5, exhale to the count of 5. Imagine the breath is coming in through the heart as you inhale, imagine the breath leaving through the heart as you exhale. And just carry on with that. Okay? Now, that heart-focused breathing provides the space between stimulus and response. Because before you do it, you are reactive, you are responsive to something that's happening. When you shift your attention to the heart, you're interrupting that, and you're starting to regulate the autonomic nervous system, so you're no more on robot control. You're taking back control. But you also haven't decided how you want to respond differently yet. You're simply in that space. For me, that space is the access point to what scientists are calling the quantum field, right? Where all possibilities exist. So if you think about a dark cave, for example, and if you shine a light into that dark cave, you illuminate a spot in the far wall, you're only illuminating one tiny fraction of all of this vast darkness. And that's what consciousness really is. It's like looking at that little spot in the cave wall. And then if you want to see another possibility, you would move the torchlight over to illuminate another spot. But then the rest of the cave is in darkness again, yeah? And so it goes. Heart-focused breathing, this access to the quantum field, is like being in the cave, that the whole cave is illuminated in darkness. So all possibilities exist. And all you have to do is to be available to what wants to emerge. So from that comes a sense of, it's a very calm, quiet, what we call neutral state. And you're kind of just listening for the messages, the information, what wants to call your attention right now. For me, that's transpired in many different ways in my life. I think the most profound for me, have you got time for that quick story?
Yeah, definitely.
For me, the most profound was when my father passed away, and I had to go to the funeral. And we, to be honest, we never got along, right? And I went and picked up my mom. This was back in South Africa. And we went to the funeral. It was a wake, and it happened at a restaurant, his favorite restaurant. He was an oddball kind of guy. And I went with the thought that I was going to get some closure, that I was, it was his favorite restaurant. So I would walk in there and the owner of the restaurant would say, "Oh, you're Alan. Your dad used to speak about you all the time." There was my half sister as well. I thought that maybe she'd hand me a letter and say, "Here's a letter that Dad gave for you," and I'd open up the letter, and even if it just said, "Dear Alan," and that was the moment that he passed, it would have been enough, right? But none of that happened. And well, I'm going to take a couple of steps back here quickly. The journey to this town where the funeral was taking place, on the road to the journey, on the road to the town, please. I was replaying a call from the previous night. I had a meeting online with somebody, and I was remembering how badly the meeting went, and I was getting more and more angry. I was replaying this meeting in my head on the way to the funeral, right? So I thought, okay, this is not going to work for me. I need to change the way I feel. So I started doing the HeartMath technique, self-regulating, getting into better space. And I came into town, picked my mom up, we went to the restaurant, to the wake, and it wasn't a good experience at all. And after the wake, I said to my mom, should we leave? And she says, yeah, let's go. And she wanted to go shopping, and I wanted to go looking for a place to install a car radio so that the trip back would be easier. Right, because it was a long journey. It was about 500 kilometers, about 6 hours drive that I had to engage with. And I remembered seeing a place, as I had entered this small little town, I saw a place in the industrial area that did car radios. So I said to my mom, okay, let's go shopping, and then I want to go to this place. She said, sure, that's fine. It's a Friday afternoon. What's the chances of them being able to install the radio? I'll try. anyway, so we drove down to the industrial area, and as I kind of pull into the industrial area, on my way to the place that I'd seen before, another place catches my eye. Well, oh, okay, let's just go here quickly. So I pull in. I leave my mom in the car because I'm not sure how long this is going to take, just to find out if they can do the job. I walk into the office, and there's a guy behind the counter, and he looks at me and goes, "I'm sorry to hear about your dad." And I just stopped dead in my tracks and go, "What?" He goes, "I'm sorry to hear about your dad. But you know, he wasn't a really nice guy." I'm like, "What?" And for the next half an hour, this guy started telling me everything that I needed to know about my dad. It was just kind of out of the blue. And I just stood there in absolute shock. Turned out that this guy knew my dad when I was still a young child, you know, when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I didn't know him. I mean, this was when I was close to 36, 37, about there. And so he proceeded to tell me everything I needed to know. And I left there in quite a lot of shock and like, wow, okay, what an experience. But when I replayed what had happened in my mind, I realized that on my way to the funeral, the anger that I was feeling because of the meeting that I had the previous night, if I'd stayed in that anger, my tunnel vision would be very, very narrow, right? But because I changed the way I feel or I felt, more information was available to me. When I showed up at the town and I drove through the industrial area, I saw a car audio place and I noted it. The funeral wasn't what I expected. It was horrible, so I wanted to get out there quickly. And then I said to my mom, let's go to the car audio place. But as we went there, something else called my attention because I was in a different frame of mind. And that different frame of mind, and acting on that, I ended up getting the information that I needed without even knowing how it was going to pan out, thinking it would come from the experience at the wake, at the funeral.
Yeah.
Didn't, yeah?
And that
So
just goes to show, like, our thinking mind can think one thing and then, you know, our body
exactly,
will tell us something else, right?
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a really
Sure.
powerful story of, yeah, just being open, right? Just being
It's
open.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just being open, and I think it was Eckhart Tolle who said, "Follow your." It wasn't Eckhart Tolle. Follow your bliss.
Hmm.
Um, forget the guy's name now, but so when we feel different inside, and we follow that feeling leads to more of the same. You know, this is kind of the law of attraction in action.
Mm, mm,
So all we need to do is to take care of how we feel inside, that self-regulation part, and then everything else
yeah.
turns out okay.
So how have you sort of followed that experience of bliss yourself? Like, where has it led you?
Wow. For me, it's a daily thing, right? So it's not always the big stuff. Sure, there's a couple of big things, you know, exciting things, but for me, it's the daily things.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's the ease and the flow that I experience on a day-to-day basis. So it's
yeah,
the little miracles that for me add up. That's what I really enjoy.
yeah, absolutely. I think it is. It's just, again, it's about where you place your focus and your attention, right? If you can
Mm,
find just the really small things to be in that moment appreciative of or grateful
yeah,
for, you're just switching your, yeah, your heart coherence, I guess, in that
yeah, yeah,
moment. And the more you do that, you sort of entrain yourself to that sort of rhythm and resonance. Because our heart has a resonance, doesn't it? It has like a resonant field.
it does. You know, so part of this is also it is also physiology. Our physiology is primed for survival. Right? So we always scan in the environment to assess, are we safe? That's the job of the brain. The autonomic nervous system is there to react to any danger without us having to consciously think about running away or doing something. So those two things are working all the time, but not always in our favor. So if we learn to quieten the brain or give it something else to focus on, control the autonomic nervous system, then we are available to all the other things that are in the environment that are there for our thriving. So it's not just survival, but thriving. And the feeling is going out into the electromagnetic field of the heart. So this is a measurable field. Up to now, science has been able to measure about 1.5 meters outside of the body. And this has an impact on our environment and people around us. So this is, when I train in corporate, for example, so you think corporate people don't want to hear about this, but they get it. They absolutely get it. Everybody has walked into a room and felt the tension in the room and even used the words, the air was so thick I could cut it with a knife. Really, is the air that thick, or are we picking up a vibration, something in the field? So what is it that we are picking up on? But more importantly, what are we feeding the field with our coherence? So if I show up differently to something, then I can impact those people around me. For example, very simple way to think about this, because I like to demystify things, by the way, Kerry. I don't know if you're catching this on with this interview, but I like to demystify things. So yes, there is this beautiful electromagnetic field of the heart that radiates out. But if we make that a real thing, how do we use that? Well, it's like this. If I go to the supermarket and I'm in a foul mood and I'm paying for the groceries, my foul mood is affecting the person, the cashier, taking money. She might not consciously pick it up, but she's going to feel something, right? How many more people is she going to serve the rest of the day? And it becomes viral almost. Yeah. Likewise, if I am in a good state, or if I take the time out, the intention to self-regulate and be in a good state, then I'm going to affect her differently. I'm going to uplift her rather than, I don't want to say push her down, but give her kind of a depleting vibe, right? So I'd rather be renewing, and that renewal she'll feel. She won't be able to consciously know it either, but she'll feel it. And she will be able to impact others as well without consciously having to do anything.
Yeah.
So it really begins with us. Yeah.
Yeah. You can definitely feel it, can't you, when somebody's in that warm state, that state of love or appreciation, and they don't even have to say anything. They can just walk into a room and you can feel that sort of nice warm glow of, that you feel attracted towards that kind of a person because you want to be around them, right? Because it feels nice to be in that space.
The funny thing is that you feel it the exact same way you would feel somebody staring at you. Have you ever had that experience where you go, ooh, what's that? And you look around and you go, ooh, there's somebody staring at me. I can feel that intensity, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same mechanisms at work. It's just that the one is a bit more intrusive than the other. So this electromagnetic field that the heart generates, it's a real thing. And if we become more mindful of the fact that we are feeding the field and feeding the people around us, how different can we show up here?
And how have you seen it? Because I'm really interested in the work that you do with corporates and how this is sort of changing the business world, because traditionally, it's been very, stiff upper lip, and we've kind of hidden our emotions a lot, I think, in business. Yeah. How have you seen that kind of transform the corporate world? Has there been any sort of standout experiences that you remember?
Well, for one thing, when we do this kind of training in corporates, well, at least when I do this kind of training in corporate, it's not easy to come from the heart angle, as it were. Speaking about the heart, we don't really have the time for that. Showing the technology, the biofeedback, they tend to pay a little bit more attention. But we speak about resilience, and we can enter into the doorway through resilience. Then resilience, as we unpack resilience, it's about how we manage our energy, how we manage ourselves over periods of time. Can we handle the stresses and the challenges of life? And how do we do that? So then the how-to part are the techniques that we teach, which is the self-regulation. And more I'm seeing that leaders are knowing or noticing that we have to take care of the way people feel when they are at work. So people are no longer being expendable. So we really have to take care of people. And I think especially this year as well with COVID, as it turned out, where a lot of people had to adapt to working from home, online, not having that immediate interaction. And then also having Zoom burnout, because it's become a real thing as well. It's like, oh my God, so many Zoom meetings sitting in front of the computer the whole time. Leaders are and managers are realizing more and more that we need to take care of the way people feel. And it still comes down to the how to part, how do they self-regulate? So when we train in corporate, we spend a lot of time on relationships, on better communication between people. I often do a little exercise where I set them, a group of people up together, and I get them to talk about something as if they were in a meeting. And I give them 10 to 15 minutes to come up with a solution, and they never do, because it's the typical kind of meeting, right? And then we do an exercise where I give them 3 minutes, but it's listening with heart, and how they go, oh my God, it's the first time I've ever been heard properly, but it's because the person, they've learned how to listen to each other in a different way. And when they learn to listen to each other in a different way, and they are self-regulating, then they learn to communicate in a different way as well. It's coming more from the heart, less from the brain. It's more from that space of quiet, and not so much the pushy anxiety that we feel.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Transformative, really transformative, and that's actually going to be the subject of my next talk next month. I'm speaking with a lady that she's got a podcast called Better Conversations, and she teaches leaders how to have those honest, open conversations. And I think especially with the work that you do, by sort of listening to our heart and knowing that we can self-regulate, we're in a better place to then communicate that to others, right? Because if we're all jumbled up in our head, we don't know where we are because we're not present in our own body. It's only when we can start to self-soothe, self-regulate, and then we sort of get in touch with, okay, this is who I am, this is what I want, this is where I am, where I'm feeling, and then you can more adequately explain that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also connecting with that intuitive intelligence of the heart also allows leaders to make different decisions on things. So there's a lot of research done, not even HeartMath research, but by a business school in Australia, based on intuition and repeat entrepreneurs. And what is the criteria that they had in common? Because there's so much information available to us nowadays. I mean, we're in information overload for sure. So how do we make better decisions given all of this information? And for 80% of those repeat entrepreneurs, one of the criteria was simply listening to intuition. Another criteria was appreciating the people around them, by the way, which is quite interesting, right? So businessmen appreciating others, wow. But these are repeat entrepreneurs, successful people. So there's a sense of community, of I'm going to use the word appreciating again, those that are working with you and around you, and also just being able to follow what is that intuitive message that I'm receiving right now. When all the other information goes quieter, what's the feeling that I'm having around this? Now, some people say it comes from the gut. That's the kind of pathway, it's a gut feeling. But actually, it comes to the heart first, then to the brain, and then to the gut. So that's kind of the pathway. And it's to the heart very fast, faster than the brain can think. But we need to quieten down in order to listen to those intuitive responses.
Yeah. Slow down and be open to possibility. I think in the past, if I'd have done this interview series like 5 years ago, obviously, I have my questions, I'd stick rigidly to those questions and they had to be answered in that particular order. Whereas now I'm sort of allowing myself that freedom and space to be a bit more free flowing and just be like, okay, just see what happens in the moment, just go with those different things, because you'll always find that there's sort of some kind of magic there, right? There's connections made that you wouldn't ordinarily make if you have that, rational approach to what you're doing.
Yeah. For me, that's the kind of the language of being co-creative with the field. So my job is to be as coherent as possible, and then be available, and then invite in whatever it is and allow that to flow, and then you see where it goes. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, you know, what you were saying about how do you use this on a day-to-day basis. Well, that's kind of how I like to live my life. Is
Mm.
what does the moment want from me right now? And
Yeah.
let me follow that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Going from sort of corporates to something completely different, ecstatic dance. Tell us a bit more about, you know, you're a DJ as well. How does that
Yeah.
translate onto the dance floor?
Okay. So before coming to HeartMath, I was a professional DJ for about 20 years, giving my age away. Club DJ. But what I found over time was that I was getting older, the kids were staying the same age, and the gap was just getting bigger and bigger. And then also, strangely enough, I can't remember what year it was, maybe about 2001, something around there. Music changed. Something in music changed. And for me, it lost the soul. And I just pulled myself out of that and I went quiet for almost a decade. And it's only been since traveling through Southeast Asia that I've discovered ecstatic dance, Bali of all places, where I started. Um, and for me, the ecstatic dance was a way for me to get back into DJing again, but also with a different message, if you will, or intention, and that is to create that connection. You know, so part of it is the expression of creativity for me, um, and then part of it's also the message, the underlying message that I like to give in that experience. So what makes myself and Nicola unique in the way that we do ecstatic dance is that we use headphones. So when we left South Africa, we traveled over with 30 headphones, and everybody's sharing the same music on the headphones. But this creates kind of like a cocoon, if you will, like a little bit of a safety cocoon. And you can't communicate verbally, so you're more entrenched with the music. The music, you can feel it a little bit more. You're not getting that bass that you might get, but that's okay because you can hear all the different sounds a bit clearer. But it really creates your own little world. And if you want to, you can also engage with others on the dance floor. Right? So then that's kind of how we set up our ecstatic dance. But there is always a theme of connection, of healing in it, of just letting go. And the playlists that I like to create tend to follow that format where we start off very slow, meditative, and because also in Chiang Mai, people not really used to ecstatic dance too much here. The Bali, yes, and Koh Phangan, south of Thailand, yes. But in Chiang Mai, it's still fairly new and people are quite reserved in the bodies. So as a DJ, I've got to kind of coax them along into letting go. So we start off slow, meditative, and soon enough they find themselves letting loose. And then right at the end again, we'll have time to connect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Does
that's
that answer your question? I'm not sure.
yeah, it does. It's I've done five rhythms before.
Yeah, yeah.
Similar sort of thing where you're just
Mm.
letting go with the music and strange experience. You feel a bit, you know, at first it's a different, you know, way of being, I suppose, but then you just sort of let go and get into it and it's really fun. So
Yeah, yeah. So five rhythms follows a particular format as well, and you might have a couple of songs around each rhythm that you engage with. Ecstatic dance is a little bit more free flowing. The kind of set that I like to DJ and put together follows that format of five rhythms where you start off very flowy and you kind of like have to move out of your body, you feel a bit stuck and you, I'm loose now. And then there's a peak where the heart is going crazy. You know, it follows that kind of journey. So I like to at least create maybe two peaks where people are really sweating. And this is all within an hour and a half, by the way. So it's quite a short journey, but it's intense, and there's catharsis, which is really nice as well. People go,
mm,
um, but it's giving permission to embody feeling, and I think that's the important part here, because music is designed to make us feel something. You know, you can listen, you can be in a supermarket, you can hear a song, being played over the speakers. You go, oh yeah, I was at that wedding or at that party, you know, and brings back memories and feelings. Ecstatic dance music is more about provoking those feelings without the brain getting involved in memory. So it's about having those feelings right now, embodying those feelings right now. And so the music tends to be a little bit more hypnotic, maybe a bit more tribal, more repetitive, less intellectual, where you know the song, although I tend to play a couple of songs that people go, ah, but that opens the heart again, right? You know, so when there's familiarity, it's like, ah, the heart expresses itself again and the energy just picks up.
Yeah, you're making me definitely want to do that soon. I mean, we can't here in the UK at the moment, but fingers crossed, won't be too long before we can.
Well, if you like, you can dance at home. So if you go to
Yes,
my SoundCloud page,
yes.
you can
Oh,
listen.
okay. I will. I'll definitely have a listen because I love the tribal sort of music.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, is there anything, lastly, that you sort of want to share on the heart and the heart's intelligence for anybody that might sort of be struggling with their stress levels or something right now?
I think what's important to know is that the times we are in now, they say it's unprecedented. I think it's just allowed us to focus more in on what's really important to us. And I think that if we focus in on what's really important to us, yes, we're going to pick up on all these other depleting, we call them depleting emotions. So we never judge anything as good or bad or right or wrong. We just see them as depleting or renewing. So, for example, a lot of people are experiencing anxiety right now, still, because of the uncertainty that they're living through. And that can be very depleting. But this is also the opportunity, this is an invitation to do something different. You know, so what is the small thing that you can do that can create some sort of transformation in your life? So in HeartMath, we speak about capacity. What are you capable of right now? And even if it's not to do something that you normally do, that's still a step in the right direction. Yeah? So you don't have to get all spiritual and sit in lotus position and meditate for an hour. That's what's required. What's required is noticing how you feel, finding a way to be okay with that. So
Mm.
part of that finding a way is about surrender to the feeling, allowing it to be there, not accepting it. I don't like the language of acceptance. Acceptance means I can't do anything about it. But if I allow it to be there, it means that I am allowing it to be there. I'm doing something about it. So when I allow that depleting emotion, like anxiety, fear, to be there, then it loses its charge. It doesn't go away, it just simply loses its charge. You become a friend with it. And that's a very good first step.
Mm.
Because that also gives you the space to do something different.
Yeah.
Now, if that space to do something different means that you're actually going to intentionally do something different, like meditate, yoga, mindfulness, HeartMath, you know, whatever it is that you want to do, take a small step towards that and let it become a daily practice. Because in time, as you take those small steps, it starts to gain momentum and you start to build capacity. So then it becomes a transformational change in your life, not just something you do to get through something.
Mm. Mm.
And then you find that these kind of things that are happening right now, they are opportunities for growth. It is an invitation to do something different. And when they come again, we can handle them differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Great. So we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Cool.
I
Thank
really,
you,
really
Kelly.
appreciate your time and all of your wisdom. It's been fantastic hearing from you. Where can people find you online and the work of HeartMath?
Okay, so I'm going to direct you to our South African site. So we have a license for training of HeartMath. So it's heartmathsouthafrica.co.za. I know it's a very long one, but maybe I'll send you the link, heartmathsouthafrica.co.za. And you can reach me at Alan at HeartMath southafrica.co.za, ALAN. You can find me on Facebook under Alan Strydom or DJ Alan Hart. I'm open to friends. I'm an easy guy to get along with. I don't say no.
Great.
Yeah, so you can very easily find me.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kelly.